Hello everyone, this is King Gratz here. Welcome back to the channel, guys. And today I'm dropping an NBA video. It's been a while since I have talked about basketball on this channel, but I think this is an appropriate time to bring it back up. So the NBA playoffs are in full bloom right now. Most of the first round series have now been completed, and we are now awaiting the introduction of the second round series. For all the non-playoff teams, the NBA draft lottery is literally right around the corner. We are approaching really the crunch time of the offseason for all these non-playoff teams and what could be a very important turning point for many of them in their futures for this offseason. I decided to run a simulation of the NBA draft lottery. I simulated the lottery with the existing odds for the first overall pick 50 times, and I have got some very interesting results that I'm interested in disclosing to all of you and seeing what you guys think about all of it. Of course, if you're not familiar with the NBA draft lottery rules, then I will be describing them briefly at the start for this video before I get to the simulation results, and then at the end I will discuss my predictions for what I think is probably going to happen for this year's NBA draft lottery. So to start with the rules for the NBA draft lottery, it's a very more simplified system. Essentially all of the non-playoff teams get thrown into a lottery system in which that they all have a chance of winning the first overall pick in the first round of the NBA draft. And of course, considering the NBA draft is only 2 rounds, getting good draft position is very important if you want to secure the best talent available in the draft. So when it comes to this year's draft lottery, we have 3 teams that finished at the bottom of the league standings, those being the Utah Jazz, the Washington Wizards, and the Charlotte Hornets, and they all have essentially the best odds at winning the first overall pick because NBA rules basically imply that the bottom 3 teams in the league will have equal odds at winning the first overall pick, in which they have 14% chance at winning the top pick in the draft, and they each have at least a 52.1% chance at finishing in the top 4 of the draft order. Of course, the lottery odds are relatively consistent, but they decline as you go down in the standings for the draft lottery. So essentially, the better of a season you had in the regular season, then the worse your odds are at winning the first overall pick. So essentially, the worst team in the draft order is the Atlanta Hawks right now, who have just a 0.7% chance at winning the first overall pick and a 3.4% chance of landing in the top 4 of the draft. However, that doesn't mean that it's impossible for somebody like the Hawks, for example, to win the first overall pick. Actually, last year alone, we saw Atlanta win the first overall selection in the 2024 draft lottery. So there's an outside chance that a long shot could very well happen. So let's look at the simulation results and see what exactly came up. To simplify how I ran this experiment, I simulated the NBA draft lottery using the existing lottery odds for the non-playoff teams with the help of sources, mainly Tankathon, and running the simulation 50 times, I recorded who finished first, second, and third in the draft order using the lottery, and who were the biggest risers and who were the biggest fallers in the draft lottery for every simulation. Looking at the results, I will admit it's very interesting to see how things went, but if you want to look at the bottom 3 teams, that being the Jazz, Wizards, and Hornets, they didn't really have as much luck as you anticipate. They only won the draft lottery 24 times between them, and that, of course, only accounts for just less than 50% of the total simulations. So obviously, they still have a very good chance at least landing in the top 3. This doesn't necessarily mean that these 3 teams in particular have a great chance at still winning the top pick, even though the odds are still stacked in their favor. When it comes to the teams that were outside of the bottom 3, the odds of them getting anywhere within the top 4 or landing the number 1 pick was quite variable. For the teams that had the most luck, notably, we have the Brooklyn Nets, the Philadelphia 76ers, Toronto Raptors, and Portland Trailblazers, who all won the first overall pick at least 3 times in this simulation. Matter of fact, the Brooklyn Nets won the first overall pick 12 times, which is quite amazing. And this was more like consecutive actually that this happened, but the Nets had probably the most luck out of all of these teams. They won the first overall pick 12 times, as I mentioned. Second overall, they got it 3 times, and they got third overall at least 4 times in the sim. Portland arguably was probably the biggest surprising team when it comes to like rising up in the draft order. Of course, they won the first overall pick 3 times, which in their case that most likely meant they had to rise by at least 9 spots just to get to number 1. And of course, there was also multiple occasions where they landed second and third in the draft order through the lottery. So they were quite impressive. And usually it was them who were the biggest risers in the draft order. There were some other teams that did have a little bit of luck, notably the Dallas Mavericks and the Sacramento Kings. Each won the draft lottery once. Considering their odds, the Atlanta Hawks also landed the third overall pick 3 times in my simulation, and the Chicago Bulls got the second overall selection twice. So, it's definitely a little bit more interesting to say the least when it comes to where exactly some teams will go. It should also be noted that some of these picks aren't going to be owned by the teams that are listed in the lottery. So, for example, the Phoenix Suns don't own their first round pick, the Sacramento Kings and the Atlanta Hawks don't own their first round picks because they were involved in previous trades. And really, it depends on where they land in the draft order through the lottery, and that ultimately is going to determine whether or not they get to keep these picks. So in the case of the Phoenix Suns, for example, who currently have the 9th best odds in the lottery, their pick is going to go to Houston unless they land in, I think, like the top 5 or whatnot. And there were some occasions where I saw Phoenix land pretty high, jumping by as many as 5 spots on some occasions. But ultimately, on most occasions, they will most likely lose their pick. So yeah, quite interesting on how these results landed. So there is definitely an outside chance that a team that's not in the bottom 3 of the league standings actually could win the first overall pick, but it's still pretty rare. What do we really get out of all this, and what do I expect to happen? Honestly, I do want to say that this will probably still go to one of the bottom 3 teams. I'm not really expecting one team to make a massive jump. If it is, then it would be kind of crazy that it would happen for the second year in a row that a team that's not very close to the bottom of the league standings actually wins the first overall pick. And I would expect that probably one of Utah, Washington, or Charlotte probably wins the first overall pick. If I had to say anything, I would probably put money on Utah or Washington, just because I have a feeling that these are teams that most likely are in like full-on rebuild. Charlotte has already had some lottery success over the past recent years. Of course, if you want to argue that the NBA might rig the situation for a big market team, you can maybe think of the Philadelphia 76ers here or the Brooklyn Nets, maybe, but I don't really think that they're necessarily going to get there. So I would probably say you stick within the bottom 3 of the standings. I don't really have an idea as to who exactly could win it, but I'm gonna stick with the math here and say that 14% is a pretty good chance at winning this top pick, and I would stick with that. So yeah, let me know what you think. Let me know what you think about the simulations, your thoughts on the draft lottery, who you think is going to win it, or who you think is going to win it. And if you like the video, leave a like, subscribe to the channel for more content. If you like this one, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.